mid-1970s, New York City was plunged into terror.
I can't tell you what effect this series of crimes had on the city of New York.
People in the area lived in a great deal of fear.
Innocent young couples were being slayed on the streets.
There's no rhyme or rhythm or reason. Had no idea where he was going to pop up next.
Literally, everybody who walked the streets were terrified.
The killer called himself the Son of Sam.
When he got the urge to kill, he would scan the streets of the city of New York.
But what made him murder? Was he warped by his experiences?
This was a terribly, pathetically lonely young man.
Or was the Son of Sam born to kill?
These individuals are hardwired so that their killing is part of their sexual arousal pattern.
It's changed. This used to be a park house that's somewhere in the middle over here before they renovated this park years back.
In the summer of 1977, after meeting just a week earlier, 20-year-olds Robert Violante and Stacy Moskowitz were out on their first date.
We had gone out to a movie first, and then we drove over here to where we're sitting now. We came out into the park. It was a summer night. It was nice out, and we felt like two little kids. I said, "How about we go play? Let's go for playing a swing for a little while." When I had walked by the park, I had just saw some guy hanging out, and didn't think anything of it. And then we had gone into my car. We sat in my car, and then the next thing, all I remember was hearing a couple of loud noises, like bangs. The first thing I had heard was a moan coming from Stacy. No, I couldn't see her because I was totally blinded. Something clicked in my head that we must have been shot. Oh my God. We're dead.
The attack was to be the final chilling act of the most notorious killer in New York's history. The 29th of July, 1976, 1 year earlier. 18-year-old Donna Laurie and her friend, 19-year-old Jody Valenti, are sitting in a parked car, talking after a night out. A man approaches, draws a gun, and fires 3 times. Donna is killed almost instantly, but Jody survives and can describe the shooter.
In most police departments, they have what they call a sketch artist. And in these particular incidents, the survivors of these shootings, we got sketches.
The gunman was a stocky white male with curly or bushy hair. And crucially, unlike most New York homicides, he had no known connection to the victim. Over the following winter months of 1976, there would be 2 further unprovoked shootings, injuring 4 more victims, this time in the borough of Queens.
The memory of the case is seared in my memory for all time, like all other New Yorkers who were around at that time. These killings began as sort of random events.
There's no rhyme or rhythm or reason.
However, there were similarities between the crimes.
Many of the shootings took place in dark lovers' lane areas where young people might be parking, and a man would approach and open fire.
Clearly a serial sexual murder in my judgment. Take a look at who he's shooting. He's shooting women. He's shooting them in lovers' lanes. These individuals are hardwired so that their behavior, their killing, is part of their sexual arousal pattern. That's why they repeat it, because it is so sexually arousing and sexually stimulating.
On the 30th of January 1977, another shooting. Detective Sergeant Joseph Coffey was assigned to the case.
I was called in to investigate a homicide that occurred in Queens County. It was the homicide of a girl named Christine Freund, and she was sitting in a car with a boyfriend.
26-year-old Christine and her boyfriend John had returned to their car after a night out, when without warning, a gunman opened fire.
And it was a brutal killing. She was shot in the head several times.
As with the first three attacks, the shooter was unknown to the victims and had immediately fled the scene of the crime. The evidence began to point to a serial killer.
It became apparent that the same weapon, a .44 caliber revolver, was being used in all of the killings.
But ballistics results were inconclusive.
Ballistics of the bullets involved did not match because of the nature of the type of gun that was used. It was a .44 caliber Charter Arms Bulldog. That gun was fashioned for sky marshals, and the gun was of such a nomenclature that it was made that you could fire it from within an aeroplane and not penetrate the fuselage. So that means the ballistics of the bullet coming out of the gun was limited.
5 weeks later, just one street away, the gun was used again. "19-year-old student Virginia Voskerichian was found dead.
She was shot in the street by an unknown perpetrator who came up to her and fired at her, and she had put her school books up in front of her, and the bullet went through the school books and lodged in her brain. We were able to compare the bullet that we recovered from her skull to the original shooting that we took from the body of Donna Laurie. Because we were able to do that, we were able to determine that we had a serial killer.
Five attacks had left 3 dead and 4 injured, and now news spread that a serial killer was stalking the streets of New York.
People were afraid to go out. It was a terrifying experience.
I mean, it was a time where one man could terrorize an entire city of 8 million people. Literally everybody who walked the streets, particularly women, were terrified.
But the mystery killer's reign of terror had only just begun. In early 1977, the citizens of New York had been plunged into panic by the news that a serial killer was loose on their streets. 5 attacks had already left 3 dead and 4 wounded. And in the early hours of the 17th of April, the killer struck again. Detective Joseph Coffey is called to the Bronx.
That shooting, he killed 2 people, a boy and a girl in the car, again, having a liaison in the car, and he came up and killed both of them.
20-year-old Alexander Esau and 18-year-old Valentina Siriani
Yes,
had both been
Isaac.
shot twice.
Hi, everyone.
As usual, the killer had fled the scene. But this
No,
time,
me, I like a
there was a
challenge.
twist.
In the shooting in the Bronx, a letter was left.
Although,
The letter was
not
addressed to
really.
Captain Joseph Borelli, who was working the case with me.
In part, the letter read, I am a monster. I am the son of Sam. I look out the attic window and watch the world go by. I feel like an outsider. I'm on a different wavelength than everybody else. Programmed to kill. Although police didn't know it, it had been written by a 23-year-old resident of an apartment block in Yonkers.
Pain in my stomach
David
is really
Richard
hurting right now.
So who was this hunter
So,
who called
yeah.
himself the son of Sam? And had he, as he claimed, been programmed to kill?
His past life had a significant
I
bearing,
have to give my
I
doctor
believe,
a call.
on whom his victims were.
David Berkowitz was born Richard David Falco on the 1st of June 1953. The result of an extramarital affair, he was
Nothing.
immediately given up
Not
for
a lot.
adoption to childless couple Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz.
Not even being hungry today.
Berkowitz's
All I've had
doted
was a few
on,
biscuits
their adopted son,
with a brew.
but
That's it.
Berkowitz was very much like his adopted
And that was only
parents
to take
socially, in that he was
my
isolated
medication
and quite lonely. He
because
had
I
very
had to have
poor
something
social skills
with it.
and was regarded in the Bronx community where
Oh,
he
I
was
don't know.
brought up as a bit of a bully and a loner.
The young Berkowitz would have sudden outbursts of anger and violence, leading to his adoptive parents taking him to a psychiatrist.
Of interest is that he always had tried to belong in his school. He didn't fit. He was kind of a loner, but not in the sense that you would be worried about him. He had no behavior problems, but he also had no friends that he felt close to.
Throughout his adolescence, there is no recorded incidents of Berkowitz having a girlfriend. It's interesting to speculate that his choice of targets are usually young women or young courting women who are in the company of their boyfriend, might be seen as a way of Berkowitz acting out his inability to establish his own form of relationship
Yeah,
with a
not
girlfriend.
not the CT, but the MRI I had done. But that's
At 14 years
yonks
old,
ago. And everything.
Berkowitz would be
That's when they
devastated by
found
the death of his adoptive mother Pearl from breast cancer.
the polyps.
This seems to have been a crisis in his life. His grades at school will dive, he loses his faith in God, and so forth. And especially the kind of underlying problems that Berkowitz, the adult, is going to show are going to become exacerbated when his adoptive father remarries and he does not get on with his new stepmother, and his feelings of being isolated, of women abandoning him, become more and more exacerbated.
At 18, he joins the army.
He went off into the service, spent a year in Korea, spent a year in no uncertain terms of just getting intoxicated on drugs every single day.
Oh yeah.
After
Is it
serving
finished?
overseas,
No, he's only little.
Berkowitz was then posted back to the US, stationed in Virginia.
No drugs
Hey, Rupert.
anymore. And instead we have a very, very lonely young man not knowing what to do with himself.
Speaking
He
to you.
finds himself
I know.
in the midst of a very intense
Hey,
Baptist
kitty. Got some
region.
Did you hit the like button?
He converts. But this is not somebody who really has found God, but really of wanting to be
I
accepted
don't know. I don't know
by
what's wrong.
others. This was a terribly, pathetically lonely young man.
What have I got for you? Good girl.
Disillusioned with army life, Berkowitz quits and returns to New York.
Yay, I found a piece.
He makes contact with his natural mother, he reveals the circumstances of his birth and adoption.
He found out who his real parents were. It turned out his mother's married name was Italian, and that the man by whom she had fathered the child was Jewish. They had an extramarital affair. And this, I think, plays a direct role in whom he was watching, which couples he sought out. They were either Italian or Jewish. And he would later write
Yeah,
this,
another piece.
say
Got
that
another piece.
he was in effect displacing his resentment at his parents, real parents, for having had him.
Did you hit the like? Yes, I did hit the like button.
That is, as he would view it, abandoned him.
I did hit the like button, yes. What did it take you? 40 minutes to find one piece?
Living alone in New York, Berkowitz finds work as a security guard and a taxi driver. He develops an obsession for starting fires.
Yeah, it's got a bit cold, hasn't it?
Berkowitz set
What's the temperature down here?
1,488 fires before he started killing people. How do we know that? He documented it very carefully in his diary.
No
I just
real
love it
intent
when it does that.
for damage, but to be able to call
I
out
can't see shit.
for help, or for succor or support by turning in a
Yeah,
fire
what do you mean,
alarm and
behaving?
watching the fire
Oh, I was
engines
behaving.
come out. That's what he was so seeking.
Oh, do you know
of
where they
some
fucked
kind
up on
of
that drive?
external
What I got you?
response.
They didn't list it as an NVMe. They put it under an SSD, so it didn't go in the category.
And control that you can have by setting a fire. You
Because the
can set
picture
a
doesn't
building
match the
on fire, a
description.
car, a
If
field.
they've listed it
And
wrong.
for these individuals, that type of control
Trousers don't
is
matter if we can get it shipped out.
It's sexually stimulating to them to do that type of thing.
In 1976, Berkowitz moved to a top-floor apartment in Yonkers, New York. Neighbors began to notice strange incidents.
No, what? Is my
Many dogs
tuner?
being killed,
I can't
primarily
like
German
it.
shepherds. Seemed like every day a dead dog would turn up in the neighborhood, either here, back in the woods behind the house, in the woods at this end of the house, and in the woods over at that end. And fires,
What?
frequent
She lost
fires
me.
in
I
this area,
don't know what she's on about.
including the same apartment number in the various buildings 1, 2,
Right.
and 3. The house you can see
It
far
is
back
your
there, the apartment
turn.
building almost took up the whole corner of the building.
Oh,
One
it's
neighbour in
my
particular
turn to
was
get
singled
picked
out
on.
for special attention.
Sick or not.
David Berkowitz lived in the back
I know
fourth
you're
floor of
only
the
making
building.
me laugh.
If you look down, you would see
You're
the
trying
street
to.
that was on, that Sam Carr's house was on. Sam Carr had a black Labrador that lived in the backyard in a doghouse.
Love you, Ruthann.
Sam Carr's dog would bark incessantly through the night. Berkowitz began writing anonymous threatening letters to Sam, eventually shooting and injuring the dog.
He has underlying mental health problems in which it's not a question of switching on and switching off those mental health problems. It's a question of his disordered thinking is actually what patterns his consistent behavior day in, day out.
Right, okay. I'm gonna have a little rant on this bit. Apple bread, ooh.
Hey?
She's making apple bread.
Making apple bread. Ooh.
That sounds nice. One day I'll think I'll make apple crumble.
Well, I'll make sure I contact all the news agencies.
Hey, I can cook, you know. Not that bloody stupid.
Remind me, I've got to order that new toaster as well. We need a new toaster. That one's shank.
Had it.
Yeah.
Well, it's been there years.
I know. That doesn't fit there. That doesn't go there. I think the stripe's going across like that, so you need to sort all them ones out. Hit him with the frying pan. Hey! Oh, none of that. None of that kinky stuff.
Oh, kinky.
Let me have a look at my jigsaw. Oh, that needs sorted out. I really want to build that. Excuse me.
My mum and I used to make homemade rice pudding.
Look. I want to sort this jigsaw out. Have you to get organised? Organised?
But our favourite will have to be, as always, lemon meringue pie. Lemon meringue pie. My mum and I got bloody caught out because we had half each. I remember we had half each, and we got bloody collared by my brother. And ratted on us. That was between me and Mum. She just went, shh, don't tell Dad, don't tell Dad, don't tell Dad. This is between me and you. Oh, she was she had that massive grin on her face. Oh, surely I've got a photo of Mum and Dad together. Ah, yeah. That's me mum and me dad. As you can see, me dad hates his photo taken. Mum was just being silly with her tongue sticking out. See, that's why I don't have my hair down, because I look just like her. Bless them. And that's me nan. That's me nanny having a snooze with Nikki on her lap. God, I miss that house. Old photos. Gotta love them. Yeah, that one is definitely my keeper. That one, that photo, always will. But the thing is like, don't tell your dad. This is between me and you only. And then my brother freaking told him, and it was like, you rat. My dad was at work at the time. Sometimes when you have these little memories, you miss them more and more. But when I just can't believe that the old house is gone now. Gutted. Oi! Blah blah blahing. Hello, baby. I don't think you need to sharpen your claws any sharper. Yeah. That'll teach you. Those were the days.
writing anonymous threatening letters to Sam, eventually shooting and injuring the dog.
He has underlying mental health problems in which it's not a question.
That's what I was gonna freaking moan at. If they think that a serial killer has mental health problems, then why is there so many? They knew what the freaking hell they were doing. So don't put fucking mental health problems on at them. No way. Mental health, my arse.
Of switching on and switching off
Smudgy,
those mental health
what
problems.
are you doing?
It's a question of his disordered thinking is actually what patterns his consistent behavior day in, day out.
In June 1976, David Berkowitz travels to Texas and pays a surprise call on a former army acquaintance, Bill Parker.
Berkowitz showed up unexpectedly at his house and said, "I'd like to buy a weapon, but in Texas you need a driver's license to buy a weapon." So Parker accommodated him and went into a pawn shop. Berkowitz pointed out the .44 caliber Charter Arms revolver, and Parker bought it, and then he gave it to Berkowitz, not knowing that a few weeks later the Son of Sam killings would begin in New York City.
By the spring of 1977, Berkowitz had claimed the lives of 5 young people. But his reign of terror was far from over. By April of 1977, serial killer, the Son of Sam, had claimed the lives of 5 victims and injured more in a series of attacks that had sent shockwaves.
No, she was
through the
trying to
city of
get
New York.
into a hiding place.
On the 19th of April, in an effort to quell the growing hysteria and track down the killer, police established the Omega Task Force.
Operation Omega was the task force set up for the purpose of capturing him in the act of one of his shootings. We combined the detective forces, which were investigators from all over New York City, with the patrol force,
Be right
which
back.
were uniformed cops in New York City, to the point where we had 300 to 400 detectives and uniformed patrols on the streets of New York, particularly in the boroughs of Queens and the Bronx, looking to catch this individual in the act of committing his crimes.
On the 30th of May, while hundreds of officers were trying to track him down, the Son of Sam spoke out again, this time writing to the New York Daily News. The letter began, "Hello from the gutters of New York City, which are filled with dog manure, vomit, stale wine, urine and blood. Hello from the sewers of New York City, which swallow up these delicacies when they are washed away by the sweeper trucks. Hello from the cracks in the sidewalks of New York City, and from the ants that dwell in these cracks and feed on the dried blood of the dead." It continued, "I am still here, like a spirit roaming the night, thirsty, hungry, seldom stopping to rest, anxious to please Sam."
These individuals are very often highly narcissistic, and it's not unusual at all for them to want publicity, to follow the publicity in the media, and to get some sort of stimulation as a result of that, because in their mind, they think that they're smarter than the police, they're smarter than everybody.
People were very nervous, apprehensive. They saw ghosts in all the shadows. Girls cut their hair, long hair that made it short, changed the color. The nightclubs, bars, dance halls, all losing business. Streets were empty. Everybody was just terrified.
Night after night, a massive task force patrolled the streets across New York and staked out lovers' lanes. But no one knew if, when or where the killer might strike again. On June the 26th, they found out.
As soon as we got here, we knew it was the son of Sam. Yeah, it was a hot summer night, 1977. And that particular night, I got a call over the air that a shooting occurred at this location, which occurred right up the block here. 2 young people in the car, both shot. Discotheque here with hundreds of young people inside. Patrol cars all over the place. I've seen a panic, people in the streets. The uniformed police responded, cordoned off the area. We conducted our forensic investigation, and we also canvassed the area of witnesses.
Although injured, both victims survived and were able to describe the attack.
As both people come out of the club,
Cheeky
went in
booger.
the car, he showed up exactly like he did in prior occasions. 2 people making out in the car, and he come up behind them and fired into the car, firing at the girl, and hit the male also.
Stalking, hiding up, trying to catch lovers unawares would be very much part of what would give a sexual thrill. He's invading a space which should be private.
So far, all the attacks had taken place in the boroughs of Queens or the Bronx, and most of the female victims targeted had had long dark hair.
Driving me nuts. Keep going. No,
It
I'm
was on
here.
the 31st of July 1977 when 20-year-old Robert Violante had set out for his first date with the young girl he'd met a week earlier.
The night before, I was out in one of our local
Hey, what's this picking on me?
hung out in all the time. And I was standing outside in front, just getting some air with a buddy of mine. And I said to Louis, Louis, you ever hear the expression, you feel it in your bones, you got that gut wrenching feeling?
I fell through to the other side.
You have it in my gut that he's going to either hit me tonight or tomorrow night, meaning Saturday night. I just knew it. I just felt it. The next night, that same feeling was like 1,000,000 miles away from me. Had no feeling at all.
Yeah, I know. You heard
But
him
I
laugh.
won't forget leaving my house, and as I was walking down the stairs, my mom turned to me and said, Robert, just be careful. And I turned to her and I said, don't worry, not gonna. I said, she's a blonde.
Later that night, Robert and Stacy were sitting in his parked car when 3 shots rang out.
The bullet entered directly into my eye and came straight across. And, I lost the left eye. It destroyed everything on the left side, and it did a lot of damage on my right eye.
20-year-old Stacy had also been hit in the head.
So instinctively, I remember that right outside my door was a lamppost. Just came out, and I guess I wrapped it around this way, and this hand, my right hand, went into ringing the horn. I knew to get attention, and I was just screaming at the same time, help us, we've been shot, we've been shot.
I've sorted my jigsaw
The
out,
young
done all the
couple were rushed
edges.
to hospital.
There may be a few bits
Robert
missing.
lost one eye and most of the sight in the
Oh, I
other.
dropped it.
36
Right.
hours after the attack,
It's mine anyway,
Stacy Moskowitz
so it doesn't matter.
was pronounced dead.
Yeah, but you probably need those parts.
Oh, the cat will find him.
The cat will probably hide them.
I felt terrible. I really did.
So this is actually a lot harder than what it looks, because
She was such a sweet girl. Even though I
each
had only
piece
met
is
her
a
on the first
hologram.
Yeah, it moves.
date. She was a
Yeah.
very sweet
So
girl.
that means you're screwed.
Exactly like that.
It was the first time the son of Sam had struck in Brooklyn. Detective Ed O'Sullivan was assigned to the case.
I mean,
The homicide squad.
it's like having piss
during that
vision.
homicide was so positive. They were up. They were, we're gonna get him. You can just feel it. I said, you came to the wrong place, buddy.
A
Yeah,
few
that
days
goes
later,
that way. Look
an
at the way the
eyewitness
lines
came
are
forward.
going.
They had spotted a suspicious
They
looking man
move that
near
way.
the scene of the crime. They described how he looked agitated after receiving a parking ticket. The Brooklyn detectives traced the ticket and vehicle.
Was registered to David Bakowitz with an address in Yonkers.
Yeah, it's all blurry, isn't
The
it?
name of the car owner was one they had seen before.
So you want all the orange
amongst
bits first.
thousands of
That's
tip-offs.
what I'm doing.
So the liney bits, them, are for the
Some information
sphinx.
about a
That
guy
never be a
Sphinx.
sphincter.
who worked for them. It was a bit of a nut job. You ought to look into him.
58
We
here.
started to look into him.
58 what?
Also at that time,
Degrees?
we got an individual
Yeah,
who called us and
Fahrenheit.
came into our office by the name of Sam Carr.
Yeah, degrees
He
Fahrenheit.
said to us, I have a lunatic who lives near me. He shot my dog. And his name is David Berkowitz. And then we have the parking violation ticket on the car at the scene of the killing of Stacy Moskowitz. 2 plus 2 plus 2 equals David Berkowitz.
Yeah, 58 Fahrenheit.
On the 10th of August,
Yeah,
police
does
assembled
it?
in Yonkers.
Well, I know that because it doesn't fucking fit.
Summer day, and it was
That's
unusual
part of Big Ben, that is.
This is a very quiet neighborhood.
I think.
Commonly, you see a police car out here on occasion. This day, there was a conglomerate of them. They
Don't
had
know
one
what it
down
is
the
here.
street this way, one right in front of my house, and on the street far up there, there was about 4 or 5 of them. David Berkowitz came out of the building, seemingly oblivious to the world, and walked to his car, which went right over about where that silver car is, right over there.
Yeah, so
he opened the
I'm
door,
going to do a
he got
jigsaw
into his
next.
car, they surrounded him.
What,
At
after
that
this
time,
one?
the 2 detectives got out of
Well,
the
we said
car.
we were gonna have a
One
race,
was
didn't we?
Falatico, the other
Yeah.
one was Sergeant Gardella.
Right, okay.
Falatico went up to the driver's side of
So
the car.
we can fit
Berkowitz
two
was already in the
500-piece
car, he had his
jigsaws
gun
in
out,
this,
and he
can't we?
said, Put your hands on the
Yeah,
dashboard.
If you move
yeah.
your fat arse up, I can fit in.
Berkowitz turned to Detective Falatico and said,
I
"You
ain't got a
me."
fat ass to take a
Falatico
shit.
says to him, "Who do I have?" He says, "You have the son of Sam." And on the seat in the car that he was sitting in was a paper bag. In that paper bag was the .44 caliber gun that did all of the shooting.
He was done in by a parking ticket. Had that parking ticket not been placed on his vehicle, I don't know how many other people he would have shot or killed before he was apprehended.
Once in custody, Berkowitz would make an
Well,
extraordinary
they could
claim.
always move along. I can always move
He got
along
messages
and
because the dog spoke to him. And when the dog spoke to him, according to Berkowitz, relaying the message from the devil, it was time to kill. That's when he went out.
but I think it's because that he
In
was
August of
working on the
1977,
computer.
24-year-old David Berkowitz admitted he was the son of Sam, a serial killer who had terrorized the streets of New York for a year.
The night he was caught, there was all sorts of celebrations. They were giving away drinks in all the bars.
With Berkowitz in custody, investigators would now try to discover what had motivated his crimes.
Oh my god,
Interviewing him for the first time,
are you sure
Detective
you're
Sergeant
opening
Joseph
all the
Coffey
boxes?
could never have predicted Berkowitz's explanation.
Spoke to him about each killing, how he did it, in detail.
Yeah,
from
no.
A to Z. For 3 hours.
Get
he
off
sat
me
there
legs.
And he he never blinked his eyes. And he
Yeah,
had a
what
constant
happened to
smile
do
on
that
his
2
face.
puzzles ago? Yeah, no, she
He
just
went
carries
through
on. Doesn't think of
chapter and
me.
verse of every
Hey,
shooting and
watch
killing
it.
that
You
he
nearly
did from
smacked
the
me in
first
my
night
wedding tackle then.
to the night we captured him. He told us that his
Leave me
motivation
alone.
was his connection to the devil. The devil told him to kill these women.
If you
The
flipped
devil
it
told
over
him
and done all the white
when to
bits, then
do
you'd be
it,
able to see where
and
they
the
all
devil
went.
communicated to him through the dog.
Oh,
that
you
belonged
wouldn't,
to
would you?
Sam Cox.
No, wouldn't you, daft git?
He felt that the devil had a power over him, and he had to go out
What
and
a
do the devil's
stupid thing to say.
He was
Have you got a
being
500-piece puzzle though?
compelled. He was
I think so.
told to go out and seek victims. When he killed a young lady, she
I picked
would
that
be
one up, didn't it?
possessed and
Mhm.
used by these
That's
ulterior
1,000.
forces. But at the end
Harry
of the
Potter's
year,
only 300.
he could then
That's
have
1,000.
the young lady.
You haven't got any.
Quite clearly, he's paranoid, and quite clearly, he's also schizophrenic. So I think
Scenic
what's driving
Venice,
David Berkowitz is ultimately
1,000.
the voices he hears in his
Deluxe
head
gallery.
telling him to satisfy those
1,000
voices,
piece,
he needs
1,000
to take
piece.
other people's lives.
When
Christmas.
Berkowitz told us that he was
Crackmas.
doing these killings and these shootings
1,000
at the
piece.
behest of the devil,
They're all 1,000
we looked at
pieces
each
what you
other
pick
that
up.
we are definitely dealing with a
Yeah,
lunatic
because
here.
I've always liked to challenge.
Well, you haven't got a 500 fucking piece puzzle to challenge me with, have you? You'll have to go and get one.
The judge ordered that a competency hearing be held with respect to Berkowitz. Now, this is common, of course, in any case where the court suspects mental illness.
There was what we called the insanity.
Ah,
case,
stop
where
using
if
mental
you had
illness as a
mental
freaking
illness and
killer.
you didn't
He's a killer. He
appreciate
knew
the
what he was
wrongfulness
doing.
of your
Yeah, but you've got to be mental in the head to do it if he's a serial killer.
not guilty
Think a
pleas
normal
is
person would do
insanity.
it. Duh.
Daniel Schwartz was asked to assess Berkowitz's mental state.
At the time I examined him for the court, I and my associate studied him many, many hours. It was to see whether or not he was able to face his criminal charges, or conversely, whether or not he was so overwhelmed by mental illness that it prevented him from rationally addressing his charges.
You have to ask the question, would they have actually abducted the victim if there was a police officer or two standing around? And the answer
Yeah,
is
you
no.
have to find
because they
500
were
piece puzzle
arrested.
from
So
somewhere.
they can control it to some degree, but they choose not to control it.
Sure, we've got one.
Of course, he was mentally ill
I
to
think we
do
just bought
this.
one 500-piece one. Hey,
Whether or
kitty.
not he was legally responsible, probably in retrospect, probably, because he chose darkness in which to commit the crimes, and he invariably left the crime scene, suggesting by his behavior that he knew that what he was doing was wrong.
Berkowitz's modus operandi was very simple. When he got the urge to kill, he would scan the streets of the city.
Difficult, isn't it?
And he would drive around looking for an opportunity to kill.
I think that's why
He
you
went
chose
at
it.
times
I
to
did.
appropriate
What's
places
it like?
where he knew that
Awesome.
a couple would drive to have a little privacy and
He's
to
difficult.
be romantic.
He wasn't a process-focused killer. In other words, he didn't enjoy being in company of his victims, torturing his victims, staying with his victims. He was an act process serial killer. In other words, what he wanted to achieve was simply the death of his victims. Because he was a hit-and-run killer, often showing just a great deal of random behavior, it was much more difficult for the police to be able to catch him.
You don't frickin' say about the frickin' burglars saying, oh, he's got mental health problems. It's like, what the frig? It drives me nuts when they say, oh, it's a mental health problem. They did it because they didn't know what they were doing, blah 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 blah, and I'm like, bugger off, he didn't know what he was doing.
Although Berkowitz had confessed to the attacks, there were fears that a trial might see him found not guilty by reason of insanity.
After several weeks, he told me that he was feeling increasingly depressed, regretful, guilty for what he had done.
Berkowitz was allowed to consult with a preacher.
There was a Baptist woman. She saw him, and I'll never forget what happened. She saw him alone. He would ask her a question. She would then talk to God. God would then ostensibly answer her, and she would repeat the answer to David. And when they came out an hour later, she went on her way. He walked down the hall towards me. He had this incredible glow on his face that he had just met God again. And so he came out of this informing me and his attorneys that he was going to plead guilty. And nothing could change his mind. Attorneys spent hours with him. I was present several times, trying to convince him to plead insanity.
On the 5th of August 1978, Berkowitz appeared in court.
Everybody was surprised when Berkowitz walked into court, and instead of demanding a trial, he pled guilty to everything. And so the biggest case in the United States, the most highly publicized serial killer in the United States, suddenly pled guilty, and that was pretty much the end of the case.
On the 6th of December, Berkowitz was sentenced to a total of 365 years in prison.
Must
So
read
what
that
made
before the
Berkowitz
sentence,
murder? Was it the discovery of his adoption? Was it his unstable and isolated life? Or was the son of Sam simply born to kill?
He was not born to kill. In the sense of, can you say that there is a definite urge there to do it? He had the genetic makeup, yes. But the genetics was added onto by the environment. It was added onto by his maturing into his adolescent years, where the brain
Okie dokie, Ruth Ann.
function
See you
starts to
later.
work on the gene,
We got
and
the
then you
quiz.
have
Don't forget.
all of the beginning fantasies
We've got the quiz tonight.
to kill.
So we've got a great deal of anger in his life about adoptive mothers who will die and therefore leave him, stepmothers coming into his life that he doesn't like. So these are the patterns of behavior that make David Berkowitz the killer that he became. But was he born to kill? I don't think David Berkowitz was born to kill. I think how he was socialized over a long period of time turned him into a killer.
I think a compelling case could be made that Berkowitz was born to kill. I think that there are certain kinds of mental illness that are hardwired into people. I mean, I think the more neurologists study the brain, the more they find that the presence of certain chemicals in the brain and the way they operate can compel people to engage in certain activities. And it seems clear to me that he suffered from severe mental illness and that mental illness drove him to kill.
What it is not is a result of poor parenting or some watershed event that happens in someone's life. There's thousands and thousands of people that have been adopted and don't do anything even close to what Berkowitz did. Berkowitz is a serial sexual murderer, and these individuals murder because there's a fusion of sex and aggression so that the aggressive act itself is eroticized. It's sexually stimulating for them. That's why they repeat it, because it is so sexually arousing and sexually stimulating. A number of people have said the overwhelming majority of serial sexual murderers kill up close and personal. Very, very rarely do they shoot somebody. Therefore, how do you explain David Berkowitz falling within that category? But you have to look at the first victim. The first victim that Berkowitz tried to kill was a woman, and he did it with a knife, except he didn't kill her. And so he then reverted to a method of killing that he was most comfortable with.
Psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Schwartz, who had examined David Berkowitz after his capture, would later receive a letter from prison.
He wrote me a letter, the substance of which was that all of these statements about God and the demons and so on were malingering, faking. In fact, his letter reads to begin with, quote, "I'm a faker. I made the demon story all up from the beginning. The reason for this was to try to mentally justify and cause for the crimes I committed. I knew there were no real demons, witches, talking dogs, and satanic henchmen. When I started committing these crimes, I had no idea of what motivated me. I decided that the demons as a cause would be appropriate. This is also why I pleaded guilty, because I knew I was."
I mean, what makes a person a killer? I don't know, you know, I'll never understand that totally, you know. But, I don't believe anybody's born like that to have that in them, but I really don't know for sure. All the victims and lives that they destroyed, they're just innocent kids, just all having fun, just all at the prime of their life. And, you know, even the survivors, tremendous trauma, but I hope they're all doing well in their lives. I've never thought about that too much, but I'm saying now that I just hope they're all doing well.
In the early 1970s, the idyllic Californian seaside town of Santa Cruz would be plunged into panic.
One day there would be a body part found somewhere or washing in from the ocean.
Innocent young women were being raped, murdered, and dismembered.
He picked up a sack with the remains and then heaved it over.
And all the while, the elusive killer was right under the noses of the cops that pursued him.
He had a great personality. He was a likable guy.
What kind of man could commit such heinous crimes?
He would have oral sex with a decapitated head.
Was he a terrible product of his environment?
His mother would lock him in the basement room at night because she had this idea that he could possibly sexually assault his sisters.
Or was the co-ed butcher born to kill?
He just erupted.
Santa Cruz up through the 60s was a small beach town. It was a surf town and it was a retirement town. Then the university popped onto the scene in 1965. It was the dawn of the hippies, of the age of Aquarius. So there was a very free and easy feel to life here.
A lot of the counterculture that essentially bled over from San Francisco area and came down here, a lot of the so-called the hippie types ended up forming communes here in Santa Cruz County, and that was attractive to a lot of young people, and including young girls. And people were coming from all over the country just to live that free and liberating lifestyle.
I was right about that power supply.
But in 1972,
The 96 quid new,
the piece in Santa
yeah,
Cruz would be shattered.
and the cables what are missing from it are 34 quid each.
There were
But I've got the
bodies
cables.
being
They came in the
washed
upper
into
box.
the ocean. There were grisly
So I'm going to snap it up.
And the thought
He only wants
a
22
lot
quid
of
for it.
people in town, what the hell is happening to our little paradise?
Nope, that
They're
wouldn't fit.
dealing with a lot of missing person reports.
It became clear that
It's miles out.
somebody was
There'll be
killing
fingernail in it.
co-ed hitchhikers.
18-year-old Fresno
Oh,
college student
anything with a
Anita
line on
Professor
goes here.
vanishes.
Severed head found in the mountain.
So that's more
It was just a
likely to
skull,
go.
had no body.
Mary Ann Pesh, an 18-year-old co-ed and talented skier, disappears.
It
No, it's the
became
wrong
a very
colour.
confusing time for homicide
Oh, is it?
investigators.
Can't tell.
15-year-old ballet dancer
That screwed me
Aiko
up, hasn't it?
Koo,
That's
abducted.
why I'm finding it hard to
Just
look at
seemed
it.
like a world gone crazy.
Right, colourblind.
Cindy Shaw, 18 years old and babysitting to earn her way through college, goes missing.
Yeah, I can't do nothing to your system now, so just what is a waiting game now on yours.
Get him off the streets, catch him, put him away.
The media christened the mystery killer the co-ed butcher.
Whenever we see somebody
Yeah,
under
it's
the
a,
age of 18
it's a lot more difficult than it looks,
who
isn't
was
it?
hitchhiking, we would pick them up and take them to juvenile hall. And there became a big outcry of that we were violating their right to hitchhike. But in reality is that we were just trying to save their lives.
And it went on. 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe vanishes from the Santa Cruz campus.
Every time we had a missing person report, we were just fearful that this was going to be another homicide victim.
And 21-year-old student Alison Liu disappears forever.
We had no clue as to who was doing this.
They didn't know what the hell was going on. And indiscriminate murder cases are extremely hard to solve because there's no rhyme or reason.
Because the culture at the time was, there were a lot of drugs going on here and a lot of the so-called hippie movement. I suppose individually we may have thought it may have had something to do with that.
In April 1973, as part of a routine firearms inquiry, Detective Michael Alufi would come face to face, not with a drug-crazed hippie, but with a short-haired, conservative young man, popular with local police.
The sheriff's office that I worked for at the time received what we call a dealer's record of sale.
One of our records clerks brought back to us a file. He said, you know, this guy just tried to buy a gun, and his record was expunged, but I could see through the blackout that he was involved in a murder in Madera County some years ago.
Affectionately known as Big Ed, the 25-year-old, 6'9" 280-pound Edmund Kemper was a regular fixture at Cops Bar, the jury room.
He would come down to a local watering hole that us police officers would go to after work and hang out and talk with us. He was had a great personality. He was very friendly, very outgoing, and he was a likable guy.
The discussion became, well, who's going to go take the gun away from this guy? Because when you look at his dealer's record of sale, he's 6 feet 8.5 and 285 pounds. So he's a pretty big guy. So being the junior detective, I drew the straw. There was some apprehension involved, just due to the guy's size.
definitely not considered a suspect in the co-ed killings. Big Ed lived with his mother on a pleasant, peaceful suburban street. But the address was unclear.
We parked right there, and we looked around, couldn't find much of anything. There were several places that had basically the same address, so we weren't sure which one was his. We were, I'm just guessing at this point, right around this point right here, when a car came around the curve and pulled up right there where that car is. I told Don, I said, let me go ask this guy if he knows where Kemper is. So as I approached the car, there was a gentleman in the car lying across the front seat with the door open, and he was fiddling underneath the dashboard. And I was just about to this point when I said, excuse me, I'd like to speak with you for a second. When he got out of the car, he got out of the car, and he got out of the car, and he got out of the car. And immediately I knew that this was Mr. Kemper, the man I was looking for, because he towered over me, and I'm 6 feet tall. So from here, we explained that, what we needed to do. We needed to take his weapon to make sure that he was authorized to have that legally. We came to the trunk, and he had his keys in his pocket, and he went to put the key in there. And so my partner and I instinctively, whether it be instinct or training, separated, and I came around to this side of the car on the trunk, and my partner was on the other side, and we had our hands on the guns. The only thing that was in the trunk was a bundle, like in a blanket of some sort, a towel. He started to reach in for it, and I said, no, wait a minute, let me get it. I reached in the trunk, got the bundle, and inside of that was the weapon we were looking for. And I noticed there was nothing in the trunk, no liner in the trunk or anything. I thought that was a little strange, but we took the handgun and we left.
Alufi handed the gun in at the station and thought no more about it. Two weeks later, 5 o'clock in the morning,
Hiya, Brad.
Officer Jim Connor is on the night shift when he overhears a colleague taking a call from the gun owner.
Knowing Ed, I got on the phone and we started talking. I could tell that something wasn't right. He was in Pueblo, Colorado. He was in a phone booth, and he hadn't had any sleep for several days. And he said he had done something really bad. He said that he had killed his mother and a friend of hers. He said that they were at his house, and he asked me if I knew Mickey Alufi, and I said yes. And he says, well, my house is hard to find. Mickey knows how to find it very easily because he had been out there and had confiscated a gun.
Officers contacted Detective Alufi at his home.
I'm standing there getting all this information and giving all this information, and I have this tremendous feeling of all of the blood just rushing out of my body. And it's just, oh my God, this is unreal. One of the deputies broke the back window, which is on the other side of the sliding glass door. And then we started looking to see if we could locate the bodies in the closet. We pulled back a sheet and we saw some hair and some blood.
Then Big Ed Kemper made a startling confession.
He made comments to Jim Connor on the telephone that he had killed all of the co-eds too.
Taken into custody, 24-year-old Edmund Kemper would then reveal an extraordinary and sickening tale. In the early 1970s, the Californian beach resort of Santa Cruz had been stunned by the mysterious disappearance of a series of young college girls and a catalogue of gruesome discoveries. Then in April 1973, 24-year-old, 6'9" Edmund Kemper unexpectedly confessed that he was the infamous co-ed butcher, and that he now had a tally of 10 murder victims to his name. Taken into custody, he would now reveal his extraordinary story.
The co-ed killer had such a fascinating life.
Born in 1948, Edmund Kemper was the middle child of 3.
His mother and his father were very strict disciplinarians. There was no leeway one way or the other.
Growing up in Burbank, California, Kemper looked up to his father, but had difficulties with his mother, Clarnell.
She was a punitive person that he resented greatly.
She was harsh, aggressive, putting him down, I think, when he was younger. Call it verbally abusive, I don't know, but very aggressive verbally.
In 1957, after years of unhappy marriage, the 9-year-old Edmund's parents divorced. Clarnell, Edmund, and his 2 sisters moved away. Kemper was already behaving oddly.
He showed a lot of pathology as a child. He would cut off the heads of his sisters' dolls, in other ways deform the dolls.
At 10, he had made a comment that if he ever had to kiss his teacher, he would have to kill her. And when you think about a 9 and 10-year-old at that point having that kind of a thought process, you begin to wonder, you know, what is it about him?
The young Kemper was developing a violent fantasy life. He moved from dismembering dolls to harming animals. He admitted once burying a cat alive, later digging its body up to play with.
There's many serial sexual murderers that have a background of killing cats, torturing cats, tormenting cats. Why cats? Because cats are a female symbol.
Kemper was showing warning signs that the FBI have since identified as common amongst a number of serial killers.
Basically, you're dealing with a young male that is engaged in fantasies that are aberrant and destructive and violent before adolescence. You're looking at an individual that has a broken home, a cold and distant mother, a absent father through divorce or just abandonment. They get into animal torturing. There are patterns that are identifiable.
Kemper grew taller, stronger, and stranger.
His mother put him in the basement room and would lock him in at night because she had this idea that he could possibly sexually assault his sisters.
He described it as having a cot and a sleeping bag and a light hanging down from the ceiling with just a bare bulb and a string. He talked about it as being a very difficult time in his life, very scary. You could hear rats running around at night, that kind of thing.
As a teenager, Kemper left his mother, heading to Los Angeles to seek out the dad he idolized.
He had hoped to go and live with his father, and he described to me that when he went there, he was rejected by his father.
Edmund Kemper was sent to live with his paternal grandparents on their remote farm. Here, the troubled teenager's violent fantasies would be realized for the first time.
He found his grandmother to be an authoritarian and a disciplinarian, like his mother.
His grandfather was out shopping or whatever, and he took a .22 and shot and killed his grandmother. When he realized his grandfather would be coming home and finding his wife dead, they were elderly, he decided he couldn't allow his grandfather to go through that trauma. So when his grandfather came in, he shot and killed him.
He said he didn't want the grandfather to suffer knowing that his wife was dead. It's the most bizarre statement, I mean, you don't go out and just shoot somebody to keep them from finding out that their wife is dead.
Kemper was diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic and sent to the secure Atascadero State Hospital.
That was a very harmful place for him to be institutionalized. He certainly learned a lot of bad things.
Dr. William Schanberger was one of the facility's staff.
In those days, we had 1,600 patients in the hospital. There were probably several dozen people who had committed murder. 800 mentally disordered sex offenders. We had psychology staff of only 10 people or so.
Although not Kemper's therapist, Schanberger would have regular contact with the inmate.
Ed is a bright fellow, and that was obvious when you were talking with him. He was kind of a moral patient.
The likable Kemper soon became a trusted assistant to the psychology staff that dealt with the hundreds of sex offenders.
We had so much access to the records, and there would be detailed descriptions of the methods used in carrying out the crimes, techniques of deception.
Remember, he was 15 when he went into the mental hospital, and he really had never had any sexual experience at all.
Generally, what you'll find is that the child will pursue these violent fantasies, and in adolescence, the sexual element will come on board, and they will have sexual fantasies that develop along the lines of using people as an object rather than a partner. They want to do something to somebody, not with somebody.
He had fantasy. He described himself as masturbating numerous times during the day in the mental hospital.
As part of his duties, Kemper had access to the hospital's psychological test papers.
Kemper was very smart. He knew what a psychiatrist, a psychologist wanted to hear. He knew all the criteria for different diagnoses. They treated him, and I think they thought they cured him.
After 5 years in the secure hospital, Edmund Kemper, now 20 years old and 6 feet 9 inches tall, was released.
He was discharged, by the way, to the youth authority with the recommendation not for him to live with his mother. Unfortunately, the youth authority didn't follow that advice, and he wound up.
You do know your camera's completely out of focus. I've told you like 3 times.
No, I did. I did it.
It's very inadequate as he described it.
Now it's working.
Particularly inadequate around women. So I think he was lonely.
Here was a young man. He's 21, 22, and he probably never had a date in his life. Probably have the usual interest and needs to connect with women. What can you tell someone about yourself? That I murdered my grandparents, and I was in a mental hospital for the last 5 years of my life. I can't imagine how difficult it would have had to be. That doesn't excuse anything, but it, in my mind, describes the situation. So he started picking up coeds, and some of them he wound up murdering and doing even worse things at times.
In custody, Edmund Kemper would reveal to investigators the full horror of his extraordinary crimes, in minute and graphic detail.
It's about as serious and complex series of sexual pathologies as I've come across.
He said a lot of things that are kind of disturbing.
In 1973, After the disappearance and murder of half a dozen young college girls, detectives held Edmund Kemper in custody. And the 6'9" killer was eager to talk. Leading detectives to the scenes of his crimes, he would explain his murders in chilling detail to anybody who'd listen.
He talked and talked and talked, and just gave every bit of information you could ever dream of. And he goes into great detail about the things that he did to these girls.
Most of the serial killers I've worked with fall into two distinct types. One group of serial killers will never like to talk about their offending behavior at all, whereas the second group of serial killers are desperate to talk about their killing. They're desperate to be at the heart of the story.
He said a lot of things that are kind of disturbing.
Investigators learned how Kemper had taken months to develop his strategy for abduction.
He spent a lot of time traveling all over Central California and even down into Los Angeles. And what he would do is he would find hitchhikers and he would essentially do a practice run.
As he would drive off with the young women, he would look over at them, think about fondling their breasts, and have great sexual curiosity about them.
Over numerous trips, Kemper honed his harmless persona and perfected his plans. Only then did he feel confident enough to act out his fantasies. On the 7th of May 1972, Edmund Kemper picked up two 18-year-old friends, Mary Ann Pesch and Anita Luchessa, near the university campus in Berkeley.
They would get in the car and he would drive off, and immediately he would say, "Oh, I don't think your car door is closed." And he's huge. He's a big man. He could reach all the way across the car, open it, close it, and then he would drop a chapstick behind that mechanism. So if they became afraid or they wanted to get out, it wouldn't allow the mechanism to work.
Kemper drove them to a remote spot. He told detectives that holding the girls at gunpoint, he had forced Anita to climb into the trunk. He then returned to the car and stabbed Mary Ann until she was dead.
Just think about Anita Luchessa in the trunk, listening to her best friend being stabbed and hearing her screaming. I mean, you know, it's pretty heavy stuff, actually.
Kemper then opened the trunk and killed Anita. He took the dead girls to an apartment he was renting. There he dismembered them before dumping their remains in the mountains. All the while, the police hunted the mysterious co-ed butcher. The seemingly harmless Edmund Kemper was sitting next to them in their favorite bar.
I remember Ed being there on many occasions, especially during the time of the homicides that were going on. He would come in and have a few beers with the guys. He was a likable guy.
While he was with them, he was able to think about, here I am, an ongoing murderer, and they don't know anything about it, and they fully accept me. I'm one of the boys. He was a police groupie, actually, is the best way of describing it.
Many serial sexual murderers have a fascination with police. That's part of their psychology. And they do that for a number of different reasons. To hang out with them is one, but they also sometimes can follow the investigation and see if they're talking about it at all. This is very stimulating for them.
It was just talk about, you know, a girl found here, a girl found there, and body parts washed up on shore, this kind of thing. It was a conversation among the guys when we were at the jury room.
On the 14th of September 1972, Kemper spotted 15-year-old ballet student Aiko Koo hitchhiking. She'd missed her bus and was worried about being late for a dance class.
She had made a sign because she missed the bus. She needed to get to San Francisco. She was very young, small, easy to overpower. Got in the car, we drove across the bay to San Francisco, but unfortunately for her, just kept going. This little girl was terrified, obviously.
Kemper bound, gagged, and then suffocated his captive. But it was only when Kemper took his victims' bodies home that he could fully act out his twisted fantasies.
With most of them, he would actually have intercourse with the dead woman. He would have sex with her entire body, then sometimes also with the decapitated body.
Okay. Right, I'm going to call it now, everybody. I will see you guys later, and it will be quiz night tonight. So I'll see you later. Lots of love to you all. Thank you so much for joining. See you later. Bye bye.